The gossip about Ryan's puppy love with the school beauty reached the teacher's ears. He helplessly argued, "I'm not in puppy love. Remember to put in a good word for me in front of Mom when you go back." Then, the diary I wrote was made public as a love letter. The whole school was laughing at me, calling me a pervert for falling in love with my own biological brother. The teacher called on the parents. In the office, without hesitation, he admitted the unfounded relationship. "Mom, I know I'm wrong. I'll study hard from now on." Mom scolded me for being an ungrateful wretch and drove me out of the Ryan family. I was forced to suspend my studies and my future was ruined. While working in a milk tea shop, the school beauty held Zhouyi's hand and said, "She's so pitiful. She started working at such a young age." Ryan sneered, "Our Ryan family has raised her for so many years. We don't owe her anything." When I opened my eyes again, I saw the two of them kissing in the grove and took a picture of them without hesitation. Then I sent it to Mom right away. Helen was extremely angry. Ryan was her most prized creation. She would never allow anyone to ruin his future. The next day, she rushed to the school. "What's going on? Why was the monitor called out? It seems he was caught in puppy love." I know. Is he with the school beauty Ivy?" Helen first went to the office. After making a scene in the office, she came to the entrance of class 1. "Who's Ivy?" At the classroom door, Helen, wearing high heels and a black tight skirt, looked inside. Ryan followed behind her, looking a bit unwell. "Mom, this is school. Could you please stop making a fuss?" Helen interrupted him sharply, "Shut up. I'll deal with you later." Some classmates in the classroom were puzzled, while others were watching the show. Helen immediately saw me sitting in the back row. "Luna, tell Mom quickly. Who's Ivy?" Everyone's eyes shifted to me. "I'm the adopted daughter of the Ryan family, and Ryan is my nominal brother." Ryan's sharp eyes swept over me, carrying a strong warning. In my past life, when the news of his puppy love with the school beauty reached the teacher's ears, he also looked at me with the same eyes and said, "I'm not in puppy love. If Mom asks, remember to explain for me." Later, to protect the person he loved, he pushed me into trouble and admitted to the teacher that it was me who was in puppy love with him. I was driven out of the Ryan family by Mom, and my future was ruined. This time, I wouldn't help him again. I pursed my lips and didn't dare to speak. I just shifted my gaze to Ivy in the front row. I stammered and looked away. Ivy's face was pale. She sat in her seat, slightly lowering her head, looking so pitiful that Ryan felt a pang of heartache. Helen immediately understood and walked towards Ivy, with disdain in her eyes. "Are you Ivy? I'm telling you, my son comes from a good family, studies well, and has a bright future. You're a girl. Please have some self-respect and don't lead my son astray." Ivy bit her lower lip, her eyes red and on the verge of crying. Ryan protected her behind him. "Mom, you're being too much." Slap. Helen slapped him hard, feeling angry at his failure to live up to her expectations. "You dare to talk to me like this for her sake? Do you think you're all grown up? Without your father and me, you're nothing. You even dared to be in puppy love. If your father finds out, he'll break your legs." Helen dragged Ivy up from her seat. Her face with delicate makeup looked a bit distorted. "With such a flirtatious face, you know how to seduce men at such a young age? Come on, follow me to find your head teacher and ask your parents to come here. I'd like to see how they've educated you." When Ivy heard that she had to call her parents, she panicked immediately. She looked at Ryan with pleading eyes. "Ryan, tell Auntie that we're not in puppy love. I'm just your classmate." But Helen wouldn't listen to them at all. That kissing photo had already confessed for them. Ivy shook off Helen's hand and suddenly looked at me, who was watching the show in the back row. She pointed at me and shouted loudly, "It's her. Everyone in the class knows that she likes Ryan. If there's puppy love, it's between Ryan and her, not me." Helen's attention was instantly attracted. But Ryan frowned almost imperceptibly. Ivy continued, "Auntie, I accidentally saw her diary once. It was full of her feelings for Ryan. If you don't believe me, you can ask her to take it out and show it to you." My deskmate Wilson, receiving Ivy's gaze, quickly took out the pink diary from my desk. I immediately panicked and tried to grab it, muttering in fear, "Don't look. Don't look." This reaction was seen by the whole class, which further confirmed Ivy's words. Oh my God, does she really like Ryan? But that's her own biological brother. Unexpectedly, she's so quiet in class, but actually she's a pervert inside. Everyone in the class knew that Ryan was my brother and that I always obeyed him and talked about him all the time. Previously, some people had guessed whether I had an elder brother complex. But they didn't know that I was actually the adopted daughter picked up by the Ryan family. Give it back to me. Wilson handed the diary over with a triumphant look. Mom, you can't look? I struggled, but my feet seemed glued to the ground and didn't move an inch. Helen quickly flipped through the diary. The further she read, the uglier her face became. Ivy looked at me, her eyes full of pride. The next second, a slap landed hard on her face. You slut! You hooked up with my son so early. I'll beat you to death. You even dared to skip classes with him. How shameless. The whole class was stunned. What was going on? Ivy picked up the diary in disbelief. After seeing the content on it, her face turned even paler. The people watching the gossip at the back also crowded up, and some even snatched the notebook away. February 23rd. I heard from others that the school beauty confessed her love to my brother, but I believe my brother. He definitely won't be in puppy love. February 28th. I saw my brother bringing her breakfast today. When did their relationship become so good? Time jumped to the middle of March. The school beauty took my brother to skip classes and warned me not to tell anyone. Should I tell Mom? My brother's monthly exam results dropped this month. He asked me to lie to Mom about his grades. What should I do? I'm so worried. My brother asked me to do the school beauty's homework for her. But my brother used to finish his homework carefully every day. How has he become like this now? The bold classmates even read it out in front of the whole class. Ivy shouted in, "Shut up. Stop reading." Impossible. I clearly. She stopped and looked away. I stood behind the crowd and curled my lips into a smile. She probably wanted to say that she had clearly read my diary before. The content inside was not like this at all. In my past life, my deskmate Wilson was a bootlicker of the school beauty and obeyed her every word. I had the habit of writing a diary, which was accidentally seen by Wilson later. The rumor about Ryan and the school beauty spread in the school. I watched them being inseparable every day. Ryan skipped classes, didn't do his homework, and didn't love studying for her sake. I once tried to persuade him, "Brother, your grades have dropped a lot. Don't skip classes anymore." But he interrupted me impatiently, "Luna, mind your own business." The rumor about their relationship grew stronger and stronger. Soon Ryan was called in for a talk by the head teacher. On the day Ryan was having the talk, a page from my diary was publicized in the class as a love letter. Before Ryan came back, I was called to the office by the head teacher again. "Luna, as a student, your main task is to study hard. Writing love letters not only delays yourself but also affects others." But I had never written a love letter. Teacher Wong was holding a familiar piece of paper in his hand. This love letter was found in Ryan's desk. He then looked at Ryan. "Tell me. Did your grades drop because of puppy love?" I was just about to explain when Ryan's cold voice echoed in the office. "Teacher, we know we're wrong. We'll study hard from now on." In an instant, I felt as if I had been doused with a bucket of cold water. I saw that in the office. Helen looked at me as if I were a heinous person. "Our Ryan family has raised you for so long. Is this how you repay me? I must have been out of my mind to bring you home. You're a jinx and you've ruined my son. From now on, our Ryan family doesn't have you as a daughter anymore." Ryan stood aside, looking at me coldly as I was being scolded and pointed at by the students who were watching the fun. Finally, with the teacher's persuasion, I was able to get away. As soon as I walked into the class, I was greeted by all kinds of looks, including teasing, disgust, contempt, and nausea. Oh my God, she's actually in love with her own biological brother. Damn, that's so shocking. Is she a psychopath? No wonder she hardly talks in class. TSK, who would have thought? Listening to everyone's words, my face turned pale and I hurriedly walked back to my seat. At the moment when I lowered my head, I saw that the password lock of my diary had been pried open, lying wide open among a pile of books. At that moment, it felt as if the blood in my body reversed its flow instantly. I didn't dare to look up and clenched my fists tightly. Wilson beside me seemed as if nothing had happened. He stood beside Ivy, looking at me with a smug smile. I always locked my diary and put it in the desk carefully, but last time, the diary wasn't locked properly. I thought I had forgotten to lock it. When I opened my eyes again, I had replaced all the content in the diary in advance. Seeing Wilson, my deskmate, looking at me with the same inquiring eyes as in the previous life, I carefully put the diary back into the desk, looking away. Hey, Luna, you still write a diary? I'm not interested. Why are you hiding? Listening to Wilson's same words as in the previous life, I kept my head down without showing any emotion. I was really afraid that she wouldn't be interested anymore. Helen was very angry. She dragged Ivy and went to make a scene in the office again. Ryan was worried about Ivy and followed with a gloomy face. All the classmates in the class followed to join in the fun. Teacher Wang, you must give me an explanation. My son is going to enter a prestigious university. He mustn't have his future ruined by this woman. You must separate them. If you don't drive Ivy out of class 4, transfer my son to class 1. The learning atmosphere in class 1 is good. He can study better there. Class 1 is the best class in the grade. Not everyone can get in. Finally, the matter was brought to the dean. Ivy didn't want to call her parents, so she was forced to transfer classes. Ryan returned to the class with a look of despair. When he saw me, the dead look in his eyes suddenly burst out with a touch of hatred. Luna, why did you do this? Were the photos sent by you to Mom? And that diary, did you deliberately write it for Mom to see too? How could you be so despicable? Just because I don't like you, you want to harm Ivy? If you have something against me, what's her fault? Are you satisfied now? Hearing Ryan's furious roar, I was surprisingly calm. Satisfied? I sneered. You saw it too. I had clearly tried my best to stop them from taking my diary. Unfortunately, Ivy insisted on snatching it and she insisted on reading it. In the end, she just reaped what she sowed. Ryan, you know very well in your heart that it was Ivy who wanted to harm me first. I know she wanted to protect herself, but why drag me into this? Is my life not a life? I said word by word. Ryan's eyes flickered slightly and his body trembled slightly. He knew Ivy's little schemes, but he still liked her and stood by her side as always. Sure enough, the one who is wrong is always the one who is not favored. Ryan clenched his jaw tightly. Was what she said wrong? Luna, do you dare to say that you don't like me? So he had known all along that I liked him. I thought I would feel heartache and distress. Unfortunately, the hidden love I had for him had disappeared completely after what happened in my previous life. In that life, for the sake of the person he loved, he abandoned me, watched me being driven out of the Ryan family, and finally saw my future ruined. At this moment, when I looked at him, there was only hatred in my eyes. Not anymore. I won't like you anymore in the future. After that day, Ryan seemed like a different person. He went to school and came back home on time every day, did his homework obediently, and didn't go out during breaks but just lay on the desk and slept. However, he became more and more taciturn. Unfortunately, his grades still didn't improve but dropped even more severely. After school, he blocked me at the school gate. I know Mom asked you to supervise me, Luna. You'd better not say anything random in front of Mom, or I won't let you off. So, he was just afraid that Helen would go and trouble Ivy again, which was why he had been so obedient during this period. Tisk tisk, it was indeed true love. But I was surprisingly in a good temper. Don't worry. I'm not interested in your affairs and I don't like to tell tales. Everything before was just for self-protection and also a counterattack. After all, I wanted to see his grades decline, him being idle and accomplishing nothing, and preferably not even being able to get into college more than anyone else. The best revenge is to make him experience the pain that I had experienced. Ryan arrived home later than me. He walked in with his lips pursed. Helen greeted him with a smile. Ryan is back. Luna has told Mom that you did very well in this exam and made great progress. Mom has cooked your favorite dishes. Go wash your hands and have dinner. Ryan looked at me in astonishment, with a questioning look in his eyes. I smiled brightly. Brother, let's have dinner. This was the first time I had called him brother since I was reborn. Ryan snorted coldly and dropped a harsh word. Luna, you've made Ivy suffer so much. Do you think you can make us go back to the past by flattering me like this? Everything can't go back to the past, neither for me and Ryan nor for Ivy. After Ivy's hypocritical image as a delicate flower was exposed, and with her grades not being good either, none of the teachers in several classes wanted to keep her. Finally, she was assigned to Class 11. Class 11 was notoriously a bad class where students fought a lot and very few of them studied seriously. In an alley, she and a boy who was about 1.8 meters tall blocked my way. I was a bit surprised to see Ivy again. She was wearing smoky makeup, a miniskirt, and a small vest, looking sexy and charming, which was a far cry from her usual delicate flower image. The boy beside her had a cigarette in his mouth, puffing out smoke, and there was a large tattoo on his arm. He looked like a gangster. Luna, long time no see. She stared at me, not hiding the hatred in her eyes at all. You've been having a good life recently. You even got into the top 10 in the grade. Are you very proud now? In this new life of mine, besides seeking revenge, I also wanted to change my fate. During these days, I studied day and night. When I finally saw the report card in my hand, I let out a sigh of relief. Was I proud? I only knew that I deserved it. Ivy's face was distorted. I've been made to suffer so much because of you. Why are you living a better life than me? Why don't you just die? Looking at Ivy, who was almost out of control, I seemed to realize that I had been tricked by my classmate and turned around to leave. But my ponytail was grabbed by someone. I turned my head and saw the man's forearm with bulging veins. Did she say you could leave? Ivy slapped me hard and my face burned with pain. I tilted my head, and no one saw the flash of madness in my eyes. I raised my hand and slapped her hard. And the next second, the man picked me up, choked my neck tightly, and then I was kicked in the abdomen. Intense pain swept through my whole body. You little bitch, I underestimated you. When I almost couldn't feel the pain anymore, I saw several policemen in uniforms coming. I fell to the ground and looked at Ivy's panicked expression. I curled my lips into a malicious smile. The pain on my body seemed to ease a lot. In the afternoon, I was invited by a classmate who I had a good relationship with to a snack bar at the end of the alley. I knew Ivy was going to cause trouble. Because in my previous life, this classmate had been threatened by Ivy. In the class, I hardly had any friends, only this classmate, and I had a slightly better relationship. So I called the police early. The next day, the police came to the school and informed the teacher of Class 11 about Ivy's detention. I burst into tears in the office and told them about Ivy rummaging through my desk. That day was a physical education class. About a week after I was reborn. I watched Wilson leave, and then Ivy quietly went back to the classroom too. I followed them and saw clearly their actions of rummaging through my desk and prying open my combination lock. Teacher Wong, the surveillance must have captured it. You can check the surveillance video. My eyes were swollen from crying, and with the redness and swelling on my face, I looked extremely pitiful. Ivy had a lot of bad behaviors recently, and the teachers were no longer lenient. She was not only detained for 20 days and had a criminal record, but also was publicly criticized by the school and then dropped out. Her life was completely ruined in this lifetime. When Ryan heard this news, he seemed to be petrified on the spot. Luna, what have you done again? I told you, don't play any more tricks or I won't let you off. Ryan's eyes were scarlet at the corners. Perhaps he was heartbroken after knowing about Ivy's situation. I shrugged my shoulders and said helplessly, I didn't do anything. She only had herself to blame for not letting herself off. Ryan rushed over and grabbed my collar. The collar rubbed against the wound on my neck, but I didn't feel the pain. You're so worried. Why don't you go and ask her yourself? She should be in that internet cafe at the end of Hualong Street now. Thinking about the location sent to me by the private detective, I said slowly, she must be very helpless now. Although the Ryan family wasn't a top-notch wealthy family, they still ran a company and had some money. As long as it didn't involve Ryan's affairs, Helen was quite generous to me. I used to always feel that I owed the Ryan family. I saved money every month by living frugally and planned to return it to the Ryan family when I grew up and made money in the future. So I still had a bit of spare money. I spent all my time on studying, so I hired a private detective to secretly follow the two of them. In this new life, I won't let anyone else control my fate casually anymore. Sure enough, Ryan's expression froze. He let go of me and walked towards the outside of the school. I shouted loudly behind him, so loudly that the whole class could hear, "Brother, school isn't over yet. Aren't you going to class?" Unfortunately, at this moment, Ryan's mind was full of Ivy and he couldn't hear a word. At the front desk of the internet cafe, Ivy was sitting on the man's lap, tilting her head up and kissing the man deeply, as if there was no one else around. She had big wavy curly hair, her eyelashes trembled slightly with her eyes closed, and there were still undried teardrops on her face, giving her a decadent beauty. As soon as Ryan walked to the door, he saw the scene. In the next second, his eyes turned scarlet and he rushed over and pulled Ivy down from the man's arms. He seemed to go crazy and punched the tattooed man again and again. I watched the video and dozens of photos sent by the private detective, clicked to save them. Then I casually sent a message, "No need to follow them anymore. I'll transfer the money to your card. It's time to end this." Ryan skipped classes for a whole day. The teachers were all very worried. Teacher Wang even went out of the school to look for him and found Ryan in the most unexpected place. Unsurprisingly, Helen visited Teacher Wang's office again. My son has been so obedient recently. How could he possibly skip classes? I also asked Luna to supervise my son every day. Teacher Wang, did you make a mistake? Teacher Wang let out a long sigh and finally handed over the photos on his phone. The photos were anonymously posted by me on the school forum. The school didn't allow such negative news to spread, and I deleted them within a few minutes. However, many people still saved them. On the photos were clearly the scenes of Ryan, the school beauty, and that tattooed man standing together. There were also several pictures of them fighting with each other. Helen's face completely turned cold and she stared fixedly at Ivy in the photos. It's this little slut again. Why is she so shameless and insists on pestering my son? Teacher Wang, where is she now? I must teach her a good lesson. She must be severely punished. It would be best if she's expelled. Look at her appearance. She doesn't look like a middle school student at all. She's simply ruining the school atmosphere. She must be expelled. Teacher Wang was so annoyed by the noise that he pinched the bridge of his nose. She has already dropped out. Since Helen couldn't vent her anger on Ivy, she had to scold Ryan instead. Ryan, how did you promise me? Ah, it's only been a few days and you've skipped classes and fought. Do you want to make Mom so angry that you'll be satisfied? Slap. A slap landed on Ryan's face. Look at Luna. She's working so hard and her grades are so good. You're my own son. Why don't you learn from Luna instead of fooling around with that slut? Is that woman that good? That you'd abandon everything, not care about your future, and not care about me and your father either? We've sacrificed so much for you. Do you know that? Helen was really worried sick and started wiping her tears as she spoke. She didn't notice that Ryan just stood there all the time, allowing himself to be scolded and beaten with a dead look in his eyes. I stood at the door, watched the farce in the office, and then turned around and left. Finally, Ryan was publicly criticized by the whole school for skipping classes, going to the internet cafe during class time, and fighting. Everything seemed like a dream. Obviously, I had already taken my revenge, but for no reason, a tinge of sadness welled up in my heart. On the day I returned to the Ryan family, I saw Ryan leaning against the door with a cold look in his eyes. His voice was faint, as if he had lost his soul. Luna, was this all part of your plan? You've ruined her and me. Are you happy now? I didn't want to pay attention to him and turned to leave. The person behind me choked up a bit. Luna, have you forgotten? Your surname is Zhou. Our family has raised you for so many years, and this is how you repay us with your calculated revenge? Are you heartless? You're just a dog raised by our Ryan family. What exactly are you so proud of? Believe it or not, I can kick you out at any time. My heart suddenly skipped a beat, and memories came flooding back like a tide. In my previous life, after being driven out of the Ryan family, without a diploma, I could only work in a milk tea shop. At that time, Ryan was still the favored son of heaven. He held Ivy's hand, and the two of them stood in front of me looking glamorous. Isn't this Luna? Ivy hugged Ryan's arm. Ryan, Luna is so pitiful. She started working at such a young age. Ryan's affectionate eyes turned a bit colder when he looked at me. The Ryan family has raised her for so many years. We don't owe her anything. If it weren't for the Jew family taking her in, she would still be an orphan now, unable to afford to go to school, and would probably be left to fend for herself somewhere. Yes, the Ryan family didn't owe me anything, but, Ryan, it's you who owe me. I knew that he had never liked me since he was a child. As the only son in the family, he suddenly had a younger sister, and he had always refused to accept me. Later, when the secret that I liked him was exposed, he loathed me even more. It seemed that just being with me was defiling him. Even though there was no love between us, we had lived as siblings for several years. Ryan, it's you who are heartless. I turned around and met his gaze. Ryan, we're even now. As for what I owed the Ryan family, I would repay it in the future. Ryan seemed to be angered into laughter. He lifted his eyelids, and his eyes were full of sarcasm. Having been inexplicably revenged by you, next, it's time for you to experience my revenge. I didn't hesitate for a moment. If it were in my previous life, I might have been so scared that I couldn't sleep all night. For someone who has died once, what else can't be accepted? A few days later, Helen came to talk to me. She seemed hesitant to speak, and I immediately guessed something. I smiled faintly and called her for the last time. Mom, just tell me what's on your mind. Helen couldn't bear it in her eyes. She gritted her teeth and said, Luna, you know that Ryan hasn't been in a good state recently. He's under a lot of mental pressure. As she spoke, she took out a medical record from her arms. I consulted a psychologist, and he said that Ryan has mild depression. This was unexpected to me. Seeing that my expression remained unchanged, Helen continued, his grades have dropped significantly. Your grades are so good, and he said that seeing you makes him feel even more stressed and he can't sleep well all night. It's all Mom's fault. I always compared you with him in front of him before. Mom is sorry. Mom has transferred 100,000 yuan to your card. You'll be an adult in a few months. This money is enough to support you until the college entrance examination is over. Mom hasn't owed you anything over the years. I only have this one son. I hope you can understand, Mom, okay? Helen held my hand and patted it gently. I wasn't angry, nor did I cry. I took the money and went back to my room to pack my things. Actually, I had already planned to move out. After all, after what I had done, it seemed that I didn't have the face to stay in this family anymore. I had even deliberately inquired about houses near the school before and added a landlord's contact information. This landlord was very nice, and the rent was much cheaper than others. Unfortunately, I had used all my money to hire a private detective at that time and couldn't afford the rent. I contacted the landlord's sister and learned that the room I liked was still vacant. I immediately paid the deposit. I was standing on the roadside with 2 suitcases, waiting for a taxi, when Ryan suddenly stood beside me. Luna, if you beg me and apologize to Ivy, I'll let bygones be bygones and let Mom continue to adopt you. Look, I'm not as heartless as you. I forced a smile and suddenly asked him another question. Ryan, is your depression real or fake? I summoned up my courage and said, then let's buy a pair of rings. Mom asked about it last time. Well, you choose. Having lived 2 lives, I still felt that the person in front of me was a stranger. So you still think that it's all my fault until now? The house had 1 bedroom and 1 living room. It wasn't big and was even a bit cramped, but it was very clean. I spent the whole afternoon tidying up my things and cleaning the place before it was finally in order. The sun went down. I was so tired that I sat on the small sofa. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on my side. I thought of the last sentence Helen said to me again, you've grown up. From now on, you'll live alone. I hugged my knees and curled up. Tears fell uncontrollably. Having a second chance at life, I was still all alone. After crying, I lay on the table, took out stacks of test papers, and began to write vigorously. At least it was much better than my previous life. Wasn't it? This time, I could still take the college entrance examination and go to university. I still had a bright future. There were only a few months left until the college entrance examination. I couldn't afford to lose. The floor I lived on was close to the back door of the community. So, to save time, I often entered the community through the back door. However, the back door was at the entrance of an alley which was a bit remote, the streetlights were dim at night, and several of them were even broken. Until one night, after evening self-study, I walked into the alley. I sensed that there was a figure following me behind. My expression changed immediately. My steps unconsciously quickened. Could it be that Ivy was unwilling to let it go and had found someone to take revenge on me again? There was no expected danger. I walked all the way to the back door of the community and entered the community safely. I stopped halfway and, on a whim, went back. I hid behind the security booth. By the dim light of the street lamp, I saw a man not far away. His eyes were fixed on the direction where I had entered. I didn't know what he was thinking. This man looked so familiar. After that, for several consecutive days, I could see the man's figure. After learning that he meant no harm, I deliberately stopped him. Who are you? Why have you been following me? This time, I saw the man's face clearly. I widened my eyes. Under my astonished gaze, the man smiled gently. Little sister, this alley is so dark and unsafe. You'd better use the front door in the future. In my previous life, this man often showed up at the milk tea shop where I worked. At first, he just spent money there, and later, he directly reached out to ruffle my hair. I didn't have a good impression of him and once thought that he was a lecher. I pursed my lips. I don't know you, and my affairs are none of your business. For safety reasons, I didn't take the back door anymore, but the man was still lingering around. On a rare weekend when I could relax, I went to the noodle shop at the school gate and ordered a bowl of beef rice noodles. Hello, I'm Kevin. May I sit here? I was lowering my head to slurp the noodles. The man said to himself, how's the noodles here? I noticed that you seldom go out to eat. You always come to this place, so it should be delicious, right? Why did you move out to live alone? Is it because it's close to the school? Which building and floor do you live on? I put down my chopsticks and stared at the man in front of me. He was very handsome, in his mid-20s or so, wearing a casual windbreaker, gentle and refined, noble and reserved. He didn't look like a bad person. Could it be that he had a crush on me? Why do you know so much about my affairs? What exactly do you want? The man fell silent and seemed hesitant to speak. I coughed softly and put on an air of a little adult, saying seriously, I'm still a minor. My focus now is on the college entrance examination in a month. I'm not in a relationship. Don't have any ideas about me. The man was stunned. Seeing his astonished expression, I felt a bit embarrassed and my face turned slightly red. It seemed that he didn't like me after all. You've misunderstood. I just saw that you always live here alone and was worried that you might be in danger. Where's your family? In my previous life, I had always been taciturn and inconspicuous in class because that's just the kind of person I was. Sensitive and fragile. How could I be so confident as to think that the handsome guy in front of me liked me? I stood up in embarrassment and turned to leave. When I returned to the community, I realized that I had forgotten to pay. Feeling even more embarrassed, I turned back. Kevin was standing at the entrance of the community. He smiled gently. I've already paid. Don't worry. I seemed to have gotten used to Kevin always being around me. He was like a big brother, very gentle and nice to me. Although I still didn't like to pay attention to him, with him around, I always felt much better. At least I didn't have time to think about unnecessary things anymore. 2 days before the college entrance examination, I went to the stationery store with my school bag on my back to buy the stationery needed for the exam. At the empty street corner, Ivy suddenly snatched the pencil case from my hand. I exclaimed, "Give it back to me." The next second, the stationery tumbled out of the pencil case and fell to the ground with a clatter. Seeing the admission ticket in Ivy's hand, I completely panicked and rushed over like crazy to snatch it back. However, Ivy suddenly fell backward and landed heavily on the ground. Luna! A familiar angry shout came from behind. Ryan suddenly appeared and grabbed my hand. She's already been harmed so badly by you. Why won't you let her go? I didn't care about him. I turned my head and saw Ivy standing a meter away, holding my admission ticket in one hand and a lighter in the other. Her beautiful face was full of madness. I won't let you have an easy time, I struggled desperately and shouted in despair, stop it. Only then did Ryan realize what was going on. He frowned and tried to stop her. Ivy. Just when the flame was about to touch the edge of the admission ticket in Ivy's hand was suddenly snatched away so quickly and accurately. Ivy turned around and saw the man behind her. She said unhappily, who are you? Mind your own business. Give it back to me. Seeing Kevin, I suddenly felt relieved. The man's deep voice was filled with undisguised anger. Is your name Luna? Is this your thing? If it's to be returned, it won't be returned to you. Ivy's face flushed red. After all, she was just a newly adult girl and looked a bit intimidated when facing an older man. This is between me and Luna. It's none of your business. What if I insist on interfering? Kevin's voice was cold and sharp, completely different from his usual gentle appearance. Ryan stepped in front of Ivy and said, all right, now that the admission ticket hasn't been destroyed, don't make things difficult for her anymore. I didn't say a word and took the admission ticket from Kevin's hand. I was completely disappointed in him in my heart, hearing such words. Naturally, I didn't feel any heartache. On the contrary, Kevin frowned and questioned, whose brother are you exactly? Your sister was bullied, yet you're helping an outsider. Well done. I explained at the right time, I have nothing to do with the Ryan family anymore. He's not my brother. Kevin's expression became even more solemn. Seeing that Luna was still sulking with him, Ryan didn't look any better either. He had never met this person before, yet this person knew so much about their family affairs. Who are you to her? You heard what she said. She was driven out of the Ryan family long ago. Stop trying to claim a relationship here. As soon as these words came out, Kevin's eyes seemed as if he wanted to devour the person in front of him alive. What did you say? Ryan said impatiently. Who are you? Why should I explain to you? Kevin put his arm around my shoulder and said in a firm voice, I'm her brother, her biological brother. He emphasized the last two words heavily. My hand that was about to push his away suddenly stopped. Even when I arrived at the hospital with Kevin, I was still in a daze. The man's words kept echoing in my ears, I'm sorry. I didn't dare to tell you all this time because I was afraid it would affect your college entrance examination. I thought you were living well in the Ryan family. It's all my fault. I should have come to take you home earlier. I'm late, Luna. Do you find it hard to accept for a while? Brother can understand. But what I said is true. If you don't believe me, we can go to the hospital for an identification test right now. Perhaps because I was too eager to have family affection, I actually went to the hospital with him. Until I got the identification report and saw the result on it, I was completely stunned on the spot. No wonder he always secretly followed behind me. No wonder he was so kind and gentle to me. It turned out that he was really my brother, my biological brother. I opened my mouth but didn't know what to say. Kevin hugged me into his arms, gently patted my back, and his voice was gentle and charming. I know everything. Be good, Luna. Brother is always here. It's all brother's fault. Brother didn't take good care of you and made you get lost. It turned out that Kevin was 8 years older than me. When he was a child, he took on the important task of taking care of his sister. Unfortunately, Kevin was not sensible and careful enough at that time and made his sister get lost. He had been living in guilt and remorse all the time. I hugged him back, buried my head in his shoulder, and burst into tears. It turned out that I wasn't alone. I still had a home, my real home. Before the college entrance examination, I received a call from Helen. She said that Ryan had been beaten and sent to the hospital and asked me if I wanted to go and see him. I fixed my eyes on the test paper and said calmly, no, I have an exam tomorrow. But in my heart, I wasn't surprised. He wouldn't die. After all, in my previous life, Ryan was also beaten and sent to the hospital. The person who beat him was the tattooed hooligan who liked the school beauty, but it happened earlier. Perhaps because I had changed some things in this life, the previous events had also changed. In my previous life, I stubbornly went to see him, but ended up losing my life. In this life, I just wanted to live well. The 2-day exam ended quickly. The moment I walked out of the school gate, I saw my brother at a glance. Kevin was holding a big bunch of roses and standing in the crowd, waving at me. Luna, brother is here. I trotted towards him. People around cast envious looks at me. I was both shy and excited. I called out softly, brother. I had a big bunch of flowers in my hand. They smelled so nice and were so beautiful. Brother said that after I finished the college entrance examination, he would take me home to meet our parents. I not only had a brother but also parents. I always felt that a huge warmth surrounded me, like a dream. Mom and Dad are in the neighboring city. I haven't told them yet. After hearing this, I couldn't help feeling a bit disappointed. Brother pinched my little nose and said with a smile, "What are you thinking about again? Mom and Dad miss you very much. They, like me, have never given up looking for you. It's just that, because of what happened when we were children, I always feel guilty and didn't dare to go back to see them. So when we go home, my good sister, you have to put in a good word for me." Because of the guilt in his heart and not daring to face his parents' painful expressions, Kevin had been developing outside all these years and seldom went home. Now that his sister had come back, he should put aside his concerns and go home. Listening to his words, I couldn't help feeling a bit heartbroken. "Well, I will, brother." Kevin looked at his soft and cute sister and felt a bit helpless. He teased, "So obedient? When you were a child, you used to play and fight with me every day." However, I had very few memories of my childhood. I had already forgotten how I got along with my family back then. Anyway, it's good like this. With such a lovely and obedient sister, it's hard for brother not to spoil you. Kevin rubbed my head. Suddenly, I remembered that in the milk tea shop in my previous life, he also rubbed my head like this. Did brother recognize me at that time? I felt a bit sentimental. In my previous life, if I had lived a few more days, maybe I could have recognized my brother. Unfortunately, as soon as I heard that Ryan had been beaten and sent to the hospital, even though I hated him, I couldn't help but want to go and see him. Because of this glance, I had a car accident on the road. We walked home side by side. When I turned my head, I saw Ryan and Helen standing not far away. My expression immediately turned cold. Kevin smiled and said, "Let's go and say hello. We're leaving here soon. This might be the last time we see them." In the coffee shop, Ryan and Helen were sitting opposite us. Helen looked haggard and there was no luster in her eyes. Ryan's grades were not good in the first place. Because of the hospitalization, he missed the first 2 exams. But after all, he was her own flesh and blood, and moreover, her son had depression. She didn't scold and beat him as often as before. She had completely lost her previous sharpness. Brother took out a card from his pocket and handed it over. "Miss Sue, there are 2 million in this card, which can be regarded as repaying you for raising my sister these years." Helen wanted to decline, but under Kevin's insistence, she could only accept it. "After all, we're leaving here. In the future, my sister probably won't be able to support you and Mr. Zhou. If Miss Sue thinks this money is not enough, I can add more." Helen waved her hand and said, "Enough, enough. Luna is a good child. It's me, as a mother, who has let her down." At this moment, I finally let out a long sigh of relief. The big stone in my heart seemed to have finally disappeared. Ryan suddenly said, "You're leaving?" Kevin nodded. "Our hometown is in the neighboring city. My sister was probably abducted here. Now that I've found her, we have to go back." Ryan's face darkened. "No wonder you didn't hesitate when you left the Ryan family before. It turns out that you had already found your biological parents and were so eager to leave? My mother raised you for so long. Do you think you can repay her with just a little money?" It was Helen who spoke first. She looked very unhappy. Helen was already very guilty about Luna. Hearing her son being so aggressive, she couldn't hold back anymore. Ryan, what are you talking about? If it hadn't been for Luna saving you back then, you might have been abducted by human traffickers too. Mom adopted her because she saved you. Now that the money has been repaid, she doesn't owe our family anything. Ryan was completely stunned on the spot. My brother and I walked out of the coffee shop hand in hand. In my ears were Helen's words just now, when we went to visit your grandmother's house, you got lost. Mom searched everywhere but couldn't find you. Later, Luna recognized that human trafficker and secretly saved you. Luna has had a hard life. She was even younger than you but was so smart and sensible. She was abducted and sold here when she was a child. She was adopted by a family. After they had their own child, they didn't want to raise her anymore, so they had to send her to the welfare home. She cried and ran out. Later, she met you on the road. She couldn't find her way home and was afraid that bad people would catch her, so she could only take you back to the welfare home. That's when Mom received the call and went to pick you up. Helen also heard it from the director of the welfare home. She was grateful to Luna and also felt sorry for this child who had no family at such a young age, so she had the idea of adopting her. I couldn't tell what kind of mood I was in. I just felt that I was much more relaxed. See, Ryan, I really don't owe you anything. I stopped crying and smiled instead. Brother, I didn't expect that I was so brave when I was so young, fighting wits and courage with bad guys. Haha. Kevin's eyes were full of heartache and he forced a smile. My Luna is the best. My mother is the boss of a barber shop, my father is a university professor, and my brother is the chairman of a medical company. I returned to my home and met them. All of a sudden, those scattered memories of my childhood that I had long forgotten flooded into my mind like a tide. The whole family was immersed in joy. In the evening, my head was still dizzy. I didn't know if I was tired from laughing or crying. I fell asleep in a daze. In my dream, I was lying on a pink princess bed. Brother was standing beside my bed, carefully covering me with a quilt. I slightly narrowed my eyes. The light was a bit dazzling. I choked and asked, Brother, is this a dream? Kevin's eyes were red at the corners. He reached out and wiped away the tears from the corners of my eyes. It's not a dream, Luna. You're home. I couldn't help smiling and fell into a sweet dreamland. Beside the bed, Kevin was looking at the girl on the bed seriously. In his eyes was the bewilderment of getting something back after losing it. Luna, how could this be a dream? This is what brother has been longing for in the previous life. Extra story, from Kevin's perspective, I was reincarnated. I couldn't believe it and went back to the familiar milk tea shop. I asked the clerks and they said that there wasn't a girl named Luna working part-time here. I waited at the school every day until she finished school. The moment I saw Luna again, I finally accepted the fact of reincarnation. In my previous life, when I first saw Luna in the milk tea shop, my heart skipped a beat. The faint scar on her wrist was exactly the same as my sister's. It was scratched by a branch when I hugged her back then. I was such an incompetent brother. I always made my sister get hurt and even lost her. I raised my eyes and looked at the small mole at the corner of her mouth. Right, she must be my sister. She wasn't living well. She dropped out of school at a young age and worked outside. I offered to fund her to continue her studies but she refused. She didn't seem to trust me very much. I didn't dare to recognize her directly for fear of scaring her. I could only approach her slowly like boiling a frog in warm water. On the day when I finally made up my mind to tell her the truth, she asked for leave. I was thinking of going to find her the next day, but then I got the news that she had a car accident. At that moment, I felt like the sky was falling. Her body was lying in the hospital, unclaimed. My heart ached. When I was a child, I didn't protect her well. When I grew up, I still couldn't protect her. After burying her body properly, I went to Tiancheng Mountain. It was said that there were accomplished old monks on the mountain. I bowed and kowtowed all the way until I reached the top of the mountain in a daze. Blood was seeping from my knees, and my palms were burning with pain. Unfortunately, all of it was in vain. My younger sister still couldn't come back. All I could ask for was that she could live a better life in heaven. Later, I drank a lot of alcohol and lay at home for days and nights without going out, until stabbing pains came from my stomach and I had already lost my senses. I saw my sister reaching out to me while crying, "Brother, why didn't you recognize me earlier? You had clearly found me, but then you lost me again. Brother, if you had recognized me earlier, would I not have died?" I closed my eyes in despair. When I opened my eyes again, I went back to a few months ago. However, my sister was different from before. She hadn't been driven out of the Ryan family, hadn't dropped out of school, and hadn't gone out to work anymore. She studied hard every day and even had money to rent a house outside. Knowing that she was living a good life now, I seemed to feel relieved a lot, but then I started to be afraid again. Would she be unwilling to recognize me? She was about to take the college entrance examination soon. Should I recognize her? Would it affect her in the college entrance examination? For a moment, I was a bit confused. I could only stay behind her all the time and didn't dare to slack off at all. This time, I would never lose her again. Perhaps God saw my unwillingness. This time, I got what I wished for.